Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Developing the Leader Within podcast. I'm Enrique, and today I'm with Marcus Chan. First of all, Marcus, congratulations on the achievement on this particular platform on LinkedIn, and also for all the great things that I see coming out from your end about the testimonials and all of that. But before we get into leadership and sales, tell us a little bit about you.
All right. So first off, Enrique, thank you so much for having me on, my man. I'm super pumped to talk today about leadership, sales, and all the things that tied to that. So, just quick little background on me. I'm Marcus Shan, founder of Venli Consulting Group, and I work directly with B2B sales professionals to help them sell and earn an additional $50,000 to $100,000 more each year and every single year without just working harder. Now, before this, I was actually in corporate America for over 14 years. Started from the very bottom outside B2B sales, climbed my way up, promoted 10 times in 10 years. And in that time, had the pleasure of obviously selling B2B, but also leading teams anywhere from size of, 3 to 4 people up to over 100 plus employees in a pretty major organization. So tons of fun. I'm excited to dive in deep about some of the many mistakes I've made in selling and in leadership to hopefully impart potentially some nuggets of wisdom that will help your listeners today.
Outstanding. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself because sales is something that's sometimes made complicated when it doesn't really have to be. And it's usually relationship based, right? How you
Mhm.
see sales in general. So let's talk about that. What is the most confusion you see in people when in regards to sales?
Well, I think there's a misconception about sales, especially if you haven't actually done the role before, or maybe you just did for a short time. A lot of people think sales is about, hey, how can I, convince someone? How can I sell them? How can I pitch them? And in our minds, we conjure up images of just really sleazy, no offense, used car salespeople, or if you sell that, we can't we just don't have good feelings about it because at one point, we ourselves probably made a bad purchase, got persuaded the wrong way, and we didn't feel good about that, or we see what the media portrays. And the truth is, those who are actually in sales, most of them who are truly great at selling don't really pitch that much. They're actually just really good at being great listeners, seeking to understand, asking great questions, and truly solving a problem for that potential prospect or client. So when you kind of make that mental mind shift from I need to be great at pitching and selling and closing to, hey, how can I really serve the person I'm speaking to? You have a shift in understanding sales, and you realize to really master selling is to really master serving. Because when you master selling, you are ultimately serving at the highest possible level.
I love that because you talking and I'm envisioning the basket with the rotten apple, and there's a lot of, and there is a perception in terms of those that sell, right? Persistent. They don't, they're always, and we have those, right? If you
Mhm.
spend any time on LinkedIn, you know, there are
You
folks
know.
out there that do have a misconception themselves about what selling is, and they'll run it to the ground. I mean, like almost obnoxious, right, to the point of that.
Oh yeah.
But I love how you put it, in terms of, hey, you got to be a listener, you got to be a somebody that's building a relationship outside of the ultimate goal, which is, yeah, you're in a business to sell, but you're solving a problem, and that is just amazing. If a salesperson can get that through their head, to
Mhm.
become the type of person that you've become. So give us a little bit of trajectory for you. You corporate America and all of that. How did you get to the point where you can say, "Hey, this is really what it is, and this is how I'm execute, and this is how I'm going to teach."
Yeah. So, what's interesting is, early on when I first got started in sales, I was actually one of the worst reps. And, the training I was provided was basically a 2-inch manual written by people at corporate who had never done the job before. So it encouraged wrong behaviors. So which was you come in there, you pitch them, it's a numbers game, it's like make hundreds of calls a day, walk into 100 doors a day. It was very much the very old school mindset. And so early on, I really struggled. I really stumbled. And eventually I was able to figure out really what it meant to truly sell effectively and how to truly serve a prospect or customer. And I started just developing just quote like, foundational pieces to my own process. Now, it wasn't like overnight. It wasn't like even a year or even a couple years. Like over time, as I had constant trial and error, as I learned, tried, made mistakes, what worked, what didn't work, I didn't realize I was building a little playbook that would actually work. And what was really fascinating was, you fast forward years later, at this point, I had been promoted a number of times, had built one of the fastest growing operations in the company, and, was leading a small team. I still didn't really realize how I created a playbook. And I thought to myself, you know what, like for me to go next level, I want to go somewhere else. And I got recruited to work for a different company, and it was starting back over in a B2B sales role. So I was actually taking a two-step demotion, but I saw the potential in the upper mobility, the opportunity, the income potential. And I'm like, this is also be a really good opportunity for me to see if what I've learned can apply somewhere else. Because maybe I got lucky. Like maybe I got really lucky building these operations over the last several years. Maybe it's just the industry, maybe it's just timing, who knows? So I switched completely different industries, went to a whole new company and tried again. And was really fortunate, got promoted within 9 months to be the sales leader, broke a bunch of records, and that was really, really cool. Then I took over the team, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I was able to show I could do it here, but can I teach other people to do it as well? And I was fortunately given a great opportunity to take over the worst team in the company. And this is a Fortune 500 company. So one of the worst teams in the company. I'm like, great. Here's a huge opportunity for me to see, can I train, develop people with my methodology and process to get them similar results? And we were able to. We became one of the best teams in the company within a year and a half. We started producing a lot of high performers, et cetera. I ended up just doing over and over and over, got promoted to be a regional director. And at that point, that was the point when I realized, and at this point now, I had been in my corporate career from graduating about, that was about 9 years. So it took about 9 years for me to even feel somewhat confident that my process would work. Now, however, even at that point though, I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm training tons of people now. I'm impacting, lots of people within my company. But maybe in my mind, there was still the imposter syndrome. I'm like, well, could I do this anywhere else though? Maybe I just got lucky with these industries. Like maybe I just got lucky all these years, every single year. Can this really work anywhere else? And what was really interesting was at the same time, this is about 2015, I had some people say, hey, Marcus, you've been pretty successful. You should write some books. I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna write some ebooks. So I wrote a couple ebooks, learned how to sell those online, start making money on the side. I'm like, that's pretty neat. Then I'm like, what I should do is I should build something that have more impact, like a digital course. This is before a digital course. Like everyone has a digital course now, but back then, not many people had a digital course. So I invested into a program, learned how to build a digital course, and I'm like, I'm going to build a digital course to basically help past version of me, past Marcus Chan, who started BB sales, zero direction, zero support, and building a digital playbook that I could watch and learn and go execute. And I'm like, this would be a huge opportunity to be able now to distribute to other industries around the world, different fields, different backgrounds, see, can I still replicate results? And it took me a couple years to build this out because at that time, my sales were, I grew to 110 plus employees. We were doing tons of revenue. I was traveling nonstop. I was in a hotel room, like at least 100 nights a year. And on my free time, I built out this digital course, did a very soft launch in early 2019, and people started buying it, which was really cool. But more importantly, people were executing it and they started getting results. And it was just like, it opened up like a whole new way of looking at things. I'm like, wow, this does work. Not just like, I didn't get lucky. Like I have learned some foundational things that has been able to apply now to multiple industries, to different people around the world to get them results. And it was at that point. So that if you think about that, so I graduated in 2007, it took me pretty much 12 years to get to the point of realizing that what I could do could be scaled, could help other people. Because at that point, that's when I realized foundationally I had something in place. And then since then, I've refined even that program, that digital part. over 5 times now. It's gotten betterment over time. But that was when I realized it, my man. That was when I realized it. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't a year, and it wasn't 5 years. It was about 12 years for me to realize, to the point that I had developed a system that could actually replicate results.
I love that journey, Marcus. And you mentioned several things in that. We could all dive in all day into
Yeah.
that. But there's two things that you mentioned early on. You said servant.
Mhm.
Um, if a salesperson can realize that they are a servant to the person they are selling, right? It's a different dynamic
100%.
altogether, altogether.
100%.
And then you mentioned that you, for the sake of an opportunity, you went somewhere that you had to take 2 steps back. I love
That's right.
that. I love that because not only does it show maturity in you at that time, and we're talking about 12 years back, nine
Right.
years back when that happened.
Mhm.
You chose to have a transition into a position that may have been less in at the aspect of what it is as a
Totally.
position, but you saw the possibility from there. And sometimes people are afraid to
That's right.
step back, but you have to be clear on where you're going in order to
That's right.
do that, right?
That's right.
So kudos to you to even get into that position. And for those of you listening, if you're looking at an opportunity right now and you're in sales or you're in leadership, and that opportunity looks like it's 2 steps back, don't worry,
Mhm.
because your proof will come out. Your attributes will come out to play. And you mentioned, hey, within 6 months, I was in a leadership position. They had promoted me. Uh, after that, so it begs to note that just because you step back doesn't mean you're actually stepping back. It's
Oh
almost
yeah.
like a slingshot. You have to pull the sling back in order to get some trajectory and distance out of that. And so thank you for sharing that. Now,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I
yeah,
think what's key here, if you don't mind me just,
yeah,
interjecting
go.
here, this is where I believe it's like the law of gravity, if you will. If you think about this, if you want to jump really high, you go down first and then you go up. All right. If you want to, maybe get a better job or whatever, like maybe you have to invest into yourself so your bank account goes down and then it goes up. And for me, that's how I saw that same role, where it wasn't just some like arbitrary. Oh, they're showing me something shiny here. I'm like, this is very calculated. I'm like, okay, here's where I am today. I'm in point A. I want to get to point B. I believe if I go to this company, yes, I'll take some steps back in where I'm at, but I will gain skills that'll take me to point C actually. So this company can help me fulfill that gap. It's going to be a gamble. And I'll tell you right now, Enrique, everyone told me not to do it. My friends, my family, everyone, like, you can take an income decrease, you can take a role decrease, you can take a responsibility decrease. Like, you build a great reputation. What are you doing? And this is like a few years after the recession, the 2007 recession, 2011 at the time. They're like, we're still like, the economy is not even that great right now. Why are you making this move? Everybody challenged and questioned me on why I was making a decision. But here's the thing, I was crystal clear on exactly where to go, and I knew exactly where I stood. I also was 100% committed to betting on myself. So I simply, when I made that decision, I jumped in. And here's the really scary part: when I dove right in, I didn't realize this, but when I jumped in, I didn't realize I was joining the worst team in the region, the worst team in the company. And then 6 months later, my sales manager quit, my director quit, my VP quit, every single person that hired me quit. And even at the point, I still was like, oh my gosh, like, did I make the right decision? I was questioning myself a little bit. However, I knew I was in bet on myself 100%. And I was not going to allow failure to be an option. So I was simply going to do the things that no one wanted to do to position myself to have the highest possible win rate. So with these type of things, they are incredibly, incredibly uncomfortable. And I'm glad I went through those things, because ultimately, like, there's two paths at that point. I could have just folded and tried to go back to my other company, or I could have been like, kind of lean towards discomfort and gave 100% to see what would happen. I chose to lean towards discomfort because ultimately, when you lean towards discomfort, that's where all your growth occurs. And I'm so glad I went that path. And don't trust me, I definitely wavered. I'm like, oh, maybe I should. I'm not sure if this is right. But I'm like, you know what? This is for the greater good. I committed to my vision. I took massive action. I leaned towards discomfort. And as a result, it paid me dividends in the future. So if you're out there, you're thinking about, hey, should I make that potential change, that potential jump? Look at where you're at. Look at where you want to go. Will this path you can jump onto take you to where you want to go? And remember, if it's uncomfortable, it's probably a really good sign. You probably should do it.
Absolutely. I love that. It is those pain areas that show you muscle growth, right?
That's
When
right.
you're working out, when that muscle hurts,
Oh yeah.
outside of you actually injuring yourself, but when that muscle
Right.
hurts, it
Right.
it tells you, hey, I'm breaking up, and
That's
and
right.
don't worry, yeah, it's gonna linger for a little bit, but next week you're gonna see a little bulkiness, right? And
That's right.
so I
We're
love it.
building, baby. We're
Yeah,
building.
yeah, no, I love it. And I tell you that when you're talking about calculations, and for the leaders out there, we're about to transition here into the leadership section here, but for the leaders out there listening, you have to be crystal clear. So
Yes.
a lot of your fears and a lot of apprehensions are because you're not clear. And at
Correct.
that point, yeah, I don't tell you to jump into anything. You got to be clear. I love how you say it was calculated because it takes calculation, and you bet on yourself. That, hey, look, out of anything you could do, eh, eh, you have to bet on yourself. You have to be grounded on the fact that you know what you're doing, and you know why you're doing it. So
That's right.
another congratulations to you for not listening to, even though it was family, friends, the
Woo, it was
naysayers
hard,
and
but I
that,
did
right?
though.
But
Oh yeah.
you made it happen. So let's talk about leadership real quick, and as we go into this trajectory, because some leaders don't believe they are in a sales organization. And I'm one of thought that from the time you was born, especially if you're not the first kid in the house, if you're the second kid, the first kid is now bargaining and borrowing for
Mhm.
attention because the new shiny baby came around. And
That's
so you
right.
gotta you develop these sales type of techniques to get the attention of your parents. And so since little, you've been selling. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're in school, you're selling. It's always with you. And so some leaders though feel that they are not sellers. And I'm want to teach that you're always selling. You're selling a thought, you're selling a mandate, you're selling an execution, you're selling something. So what would you tell leaders that don't believe they're in a sales position?
Yeah, so I'll share a little story when I had this aha, because now I'm on the same page. I totally agree with you, right? Because ultimately, a sale is influencing another person to part ways with time, money, or resources of some sort. So I remember my very first leadership role. I had been fortunate to start having success. They say, "Hey, Marcus, listen, we're gonna not give you a promotion. We're going to have you take over another operation. You're a peer to them. However, you are running the operation and you are responsible for getting the two people on your team, the small team, bought into the vision and get them performing. If you do a really good job, we're going to promote you, but we're not going to pay you any more or do anything else. So this is a proof to us you are worth it. I'm like, all right. I mean, honestly, they pulled a fast one on me at the time, but I'm like, okay, I got it, boss. I got you. So I remember, day one, because I'm a huge nerd. I built this whole like master 30, 60, 90 day plan, highly detailed, highly calculated out. I'm like, this is everything that I've been doing. This is exactly what we're going to do. I built basically a sales playbook. And day one, I'm like, hey team, it's like two people, it's small. I'm like, hey team, I'm like, I know you guys have been doing absolutely terrible. You're one of the worst teams, out here. But this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do A, B, C. This is my whole strategy. We're gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. And I remember looking at their faces after I was like off my soapbox, and they're just like they're looking on their faces like this disgust, and they're like, all right. I mean, I had enough at least emotional intelligence to realize they weren't bought in. And I remember going home that night and going to my girlfriend, now wife, my girlfriend at the time. I'm like, I don't think my team likes me. Like, and she's like, well, what do you mean? I explained what happened. She's like, well, yeah, dummy. Like, wow, they're not even bought into you. I'm like, bought into me. I mean, I was like, but Bill put me in this role. He said, this is my job. They have to listen to me. They have to do what I tell them because I know I don't have the title, but it's my responsibility. Like, how else am I gonna get promoted? And she, and that was, at that time, my girlfriend's like, well, do you think they're gonna buy into you when you talk like that? I'm like, what do you mean? And that was an aha for me, a realization that I was so focused on being a selfish, individualistic salesperson that I didn't understand that I needed them to be bought into me. I didn't understand that I needed to get them bought into a vision, that really responsibilities, titles, or mandates mean absolutely nothing without the buy-in of my people. So I remember the next day, I got to the office early. I cleaned the whole office up, and the team came in begrudgingly. I could see it. Right, it was like winter time, so it's even worse. It's dark out. Everyone's in a bad mood, and I held them. I held them. I just apologized. I said, hey, listen, like, I'm sorry. Like, I think I came in too high. I came in wrong, and I realized it was all about me. And I realized I know nothing about each of you. Because I really had not even at this point had not taken the time to truly seek to understand their perspective, where they were coming from, why maybe they thought that the branch was performing, and what could be done differently. So I came in here hot, like, just with all they trying to just shift them and sell them into, if you will, into my idea, and that was the wrong way of thinking. So I came in, and like Stephen Covey says, and 7 highly effective habits of effective people, seek to understand. So I went out there, I sought to understand them, got to understand who they were, what they're about, what extrinsically motivates them, what intrinsically motivates them. And I started getting them slowly bought into my vision. When I aligned where they wanted to go was the same path to get to where I want to go as well. And once they realized it's the same path to get to hit basically all our goals, they became much more bought in. And at that point, I started realizing I can't just try to convince my team to basically do what I wanted. I need to influence them. I need to positively influence their behaviors. And that was a really major wake up call for me because as I brought in new people, even if they were external hires, I had that same perspective. I need to serve them first, get to understand them, have them understand from me what I'm like, and get them bought into me. And once they're bought into me, am I able to tap into their discretionary effort, their intrinsic motivation to leverage them to maximize their own performance? So that was a big turning point for me. And even throughout the time as leading small teams, big teams, I've learned so many lessons. But ultimately, the more effective you are at being able to influence your team or quote unquote sell them, the better your performance can be as a leader, the happier you can be as well. But more importantly, when you do it this way, you will create not just salespeople or employees, you'll create other leaders who are willing to do a lot more than just their job description. But it starts with understanding how do you effectively influence and sell to your team.
That's wonderful to hear that that aha moment came. Uh, I love the influence upon you. Your girlfriend at the time, wife
Yeah.
now. How plain she saw, how plainly she
Yeah.
saw the
Yeah.
situation playing out.
Yeah.
But when you're in it, you don't necessarily see it.
Totally.
So for leaders that are out there listening right now, you might not be seeing the full story. So if you're looking at your teams and they're not buying into some of the things that you're telling them, hey, follow Marcus's road there, take a little humble pie, eat some of that, and then go back and say, hey, I may have gotten this wrong here. What can we do collectively to get us on the right track so that then we can implement something that I think is going to help us out as a team? And then I'll kind of let you digest that for a little bit and see how we can do this. That was a wonderful story of how leaders can get from A to C. I love how you did that, right? Without too much pain. Uh,
That's right.
so leaders nowadays have, unfortunately, uh, we're people. We're
That's right.
people, and we we tend to want to develop on our own. We don't want to take Marcus's, word for it. We don't want to take
Right.
Enrique's word for it. For some reason or another, we like the pain of,
Oh yeah.
of going through these things over and over again. Uh, So, what could you tell a leader that is fighting the urge to, take that humility road, that will help influence their teams positively? Because there's some apprehension onto the things that we're talking about.
Sure. I think one of the most valuable things you can do, and there's a couple different ways you can go about this, right? Is seeking feedback first. I like to make decisions based off of facts and not feelings, but be able to still have an objective way of looking at things. So, if you're a leader who's thinking, oh, I got this figured out, Marcus and Enrique, they're full of what, whatever. I get it. What I would challenge you, if you're thinking that way, is go out there and seek some feedback. And I'll recommend a couple different ways. The number one, sitting down one-on-one with every single employee of yours and put them in a comfortable environment where they feel open to give you feedback and seek some feedback. And as asking questions like, hey, what am I doing really well for you? What can I improve? How best can I lead you? What do I do that drives you crazy? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? How can I be a better leader for you? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Questions along those lines where they're open-ended. Now, again, you have to put them in a position to feel comfortable giving that feedback. Although otherwise, they won't tell you that feedback. If they only tell you what you want to hear, then that becomes a major issue. Number two, what I'd also recommend as well is it could be a third-party company. It could be a survey monkey is doing an anonymous survey asking very similar questions. And if you at this point, you can add in sliding scale questions on a scale 1 to 10. How would you write blank about me? And get that open feedback. And you want to have a large sample size. You can get as many people do as possible. So if you have 2 people do it, that's not enough data. If you have a team of 10, get at least 50% plus of people to do it. And you're looking for patterns and common things. And when you get that feedback, then you're going to have some pretty good ideas about what is important to you. And I'll tell you right now, even leading teams for years, those are painful to get. Some stuff you can be like, yep, I knew it. And stuff like, oh, wow, I had no idea. I wonder who this is, but it doesn't really matter. If enough people have said it, that becomes an issue. So I'll give you a real good example. So, part of the issue is when you consistently perform over time, you end up creating biases towards yourself where sometimes you just don't see things the same way, and you may over justify certain things. So, for example, one time I gotten feedback from a rep, just one person, a big team, over 100 employees. One person tells me they're open. They told me, say, hey, Marcus, I feel like when you come into town, you spend more time with the top performers than the bottom performers. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, my ego got ahead. Like, okay, whatever. That's because you're not performing, right? I'm like, justifying. I'm like, you're not performing, of course. Get better at your job. But in my head, I'm like, your ego takes over, right? Like my team's performing. So, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then fast forward, I did a feedback survey, and there was a couple other people that said the same thing, and that was like an eye-opening moment for me because I had a choice at that point. I could either number one, continue the ego and not grow or be better, or number two, I could face the facts that at least a small percentage of people probably felt the same way. So that meant I needed to change my behaviors because how I perceived what I was doing was not being perceived the same way by everyone else. And those people that I ended up finding out, they were all lower performers. That's okay. So that made me realize, you know what? That means I need to do some things to create a better perception in their minds and really help them as well. So I started making shifts, and that was really, really positive. And I was really happy to see that, the next 6 months later, we did another survey again, and that wasn't even on there anymore. I'm like, beautiful. So again, it's one of those things where I find as a leader, the more self-awareness you can build, it can make you a better version of you. And that's awareness from other people. They share with you the perception from your team below you, laterally, and above you. And when you can get that full scope of 360 around view, you can become a better version of you by making sure you take in the feedback and grow from it every time you get.
Yeah, that's some solid stuff right there, Marcus. I tell you, you're talking. I'm like, yep, 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 yep. you know, eventually, whether you're in a whatever industry you may be, if you're a leader, you're going to have to sell not just the ideas that you have to execute a mission at your company, but you have to sell, uh, the product that your company has. Some people are effective at it, some people are not effective at it. I've watched you on LinkedIn, and I've watched all your comments, and I've seen all the posts that you've become very successful around the topic of selling, right? If somebody wanted to say, Marcus not only got some solid leadership points here, but he also has a solid selling record. If they wanted to get a hold of you, get into one of your programs, maybe have you coach them through or lead them through a seminar, how would they do that?
Super simple, right? So you can either message me on LinkedIn. My name is easy to find, Marcus Chan, only guide to speakers and tagline, or they can head over to my website, which is sixfiguresalesacademy.com. Those are great places to go. And ultimately, what I always tell people as well, and this is like, it's not about investing into my program, whatever. Investing in yourself is one of the most important things you can do as a professional, right? So as a leader or whatever, whether it's investing in the sales, if you that could be key, or maybe you want to get better at public speaking, because it's going to help you communicate better to your team. If you want to know how to write better, whatever it's going to be, doing it up front is going to pay you dividends down the road. So if you're a new leader, invest now. If you've been there in the game for a while, invest now. If you've been doing it for a long time, invest now, because you can always grow. And the more you have that growth mindset, you will see it actually reflects upon your people now, because they see you doing the same thing to become better versions of them. If you yourself are unwilling to grow and develop yourself, your team will become a reflection of that as well.
That's a very powerful statement there, Marcus. And I've seen that come to play in a lot of people's careers. And those that took the time to invest in themselves are the ones that got the most dividends out, in the long run. So, first of all, Marcus, thank you for sharing your day with us, your thoughts and your comments around not only sales, but leadership. I really appreciate you taking your time out to speak with us today. For those of you listening, we're going to get a lot of nuggets out of this conversation throughout the next week or so. But Marcus, thank you once again for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. Absolute pleasure.
All right, folks, you know how we like to end this show. Success to you.